Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for participating here today with Dr. Gañán. I have important linkage with Dr. Gañán, so that is why we are treating us as family because we were students in our PhD. He has accompanied me with many progress during my study progress. He is a person who has dedicated into the study for social security for the world of law, in which he has been served in different environments as professional, as a consultant, as researcher, as lecturer. He has accepted our invitation to the CST to talk about an important topic, which is justiciability in social security. This is a very important topic that we can see there as relevant since we are going to work into the CST and also for the training program that we are offering right now to our member institutions. And that is why this is it has a huge relevance into social security as human right, and also that is a transcendent thing to have all the pathways to make this as a human right. All our countries have commercial branches into the judicial branches that has a purpose to guarantee effectiveness of the rights. However, there are few countries where there has been developed a special actions into the legal environment and also for the essential things that are what is the right for the labor and also just to enhance or to work into to work enhance the work environment for these effective things. So we have to take into required time to improve these rights. Along with Colombia and this seminar, as we reported already, that talk about the autonomy for the right to social security in some actions. Not only is necessary for the consideration and consideration for their rights, but also the instruments to make it effective. We are talking about rights green to that has not concrete into the reality, but people has these human rights that is already considered as essential, and for them to have the possibility to make it in real. So this is the main objective in which Dr. Gañán is going to develop this session. I hope this session with all of you. So we are going to drink some coffee to share certain reflections with people with this experience and vision on this topic can help us on this. Thank you very much again, everyone. Thank you very much, Jaime. And we pass the floor with Dr. Gañán. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation from CIESS. Thank you very much, Dr. Emilia and Dr. Carmen, and Dr. Elizabeth and Dr. Berenice. Thank you very much for all the staff that are working in this coffee session. And here in Colombia, we have a grateful word. When I listened that it was going to teach into this CIESS coffee, it was very interesting because it's just to make some friends. So in this sense, this is the sense of this talk, just to reflect among friends what are the most important reflections for the law in which we are how dedicated into the research and also for the professional judicial environment. And not only for the social security, but also for the human rights. In personally, this is my passion for the health, and also to have a dignified life for everyone. I just have one question. I will I'm going to share my screen. Or could you help me to share my screen? Yes, please go ahead. Can you see my screen? Yes, we can see it now. I'm just going to introduce this tea session. We have here a dog, a cup of coffee because I'm interested in dogs. The purpose of this is just to have a short talk with as friends or just to drink some coffee, even though we have certain reflections of sharing reflections, we can do it just in a friendly way to construct certain things in favor for the social security and not only for human rights, but also over the topics that Dr. Emilio already mentioned before. And what are the main topics that involve our societies, our countries, and the progress into the human rights? I will have an approach into the social security within 3 dimensions. So I will ask you to see this into 3 dimensions because we are going to see law during 3 dimensions. We are not to talk about this in a traditional way, but we are going to talk into the genesis of the law and certain important topics into the principles of the law. Because we know that it is a human right, but also specifically in our world, it has to be secure into an essential right that is derived into the fundamental foundations of the international laws. And also, what are the protection organizations for the social security? This is some mechanisms for the protection within a social security as human right. Into these 3 dimensions we are going to consider a one dimension, the human social security as human right. The other one, the social security for the public service, station public service, and also for the social security as system or systems. In this case, I'm going to say something. The right for social security right now, and to being a human right, as we consider it a human right, because we know that social security starts as social construct in which we can put in solidarity. It means that someone can help someone else. So it means solidarity. And we understand solidarity just to meet all the risk. So historically, it's something that has been converted into a right, but also that in our countries, especially into the Latin America, it is essentially a conceived is essential thing as a system, which is the system of social security. So we have to understand this as the set of certain public policies that meet the protection, and also for certain risks that are the natural labor risks. In this thing, I'm going to talk about in different ways just to have a general vision, a historical general vision for the conception of social security that we are trying to reflect on it. Not only for the traditional way to see the social security from Bismarck in general, as all countries have knowledge from Bismarck. And after this, we are going to talk about the Bismarck model, but we also have a other view from the contributive social security and the social security based on pensions, health, and labor risks. And it is very important into a more widened amplification, which is the consideration for social security, that it means for the quality of life, wellness, that this principle has to be used or is translated into quality of life. So in this case, three dimensions will have three different principles and three different legislation support. So that is why I want to begin right now with a certain state. I would say that this is a human right and essential for social security. From this, we have five important topics here in this coffee that is related to the social security. That is, what is the concept of social security? Nowadays, we can change this vision into certain years. Second, what does it mean to have right? We have repeated many times in many scenarios. So it means that we have a human right. But also I put into the adjective of human, but it will be essential. So it has to do with this talk. I reiterate that it's human, a human right. We can consider it into an essential right. If we know that fundamental, essential, they have the positive connotation. And we can put into an example as the systems that started many years ago. So it is essential. It has to be essential for when we're going to talk about this essentialist for the right. One question I want to ask you: if someone want to participate, this coffee was titled as Justice in Social Security at the beginning. But I have a question for some officials or legal officials or who has been working in the legal departments. What would you think? Well, is the Social Security, the justice in Social Security? So we have to start from the justiciability. That maybe, what is the justiciability? This word maybe it's strange for someone. What is the justiciability? Oh, does anyone tell me what did you understand as justiciability? Yes, we are here attentive for the people who want to participate here. Is anyone interested in participating? Please raise your hand. Remember that we are talking here in a coffee, so we are just talking into a friendship environment in favor to the human rights, especially for the social security topics. We don't have anyone. Okay, so I provide the meaning for this in legal terms or colloquial terms. Justiciability means especially for that the ways or the mechanisms or guarantees or actions to make a human right, since we have it here in certain norms that it can belong into a right for the consideration for the human rights. In the Latin American law, we can consider it into the real human rights. And many times we don't see here that it happens in the majority of the countries, but the social security sometimes we see it that it's declined as or is not considered a human right. So sometimes we can have some conflicts in recognizing this as a pension in the pension environment, or for in certain institutions is not recognized as a human right into the labor market, since we have this distinction into between countries. In certain occasions, the health attention is not considered. So we have a more widened concept here to provide this a dignified education or a decent health. So in this case, disability is a way in which the world has to do to be part of the just legal organizations to make it effective the right. It means to look for the right or the fundamental right to social security. In this sense, we have international mechanisms as the UN mechanisms. But also we have other mechanisms, a inter-American system for human rights. And also we have other mechanisms for the ILO that it's called labor mechanisms when we talk about for the social security or the labor market. But also we have other national mechanisms that are very important that depending on the country, they are based into the Human Rights Convention for the American Convention. We all are based into the same article. So because we are constitutional states, we should have mechanisms, essential mechanisms, not just to make it vulnerable for the people for the health or social security for pensions or health, so they can go or to ask for certain demands or processes that are taking longer than usual. For example, in our country, we have certain processes. When I litigate into certain disability processes, it takes I'm almost 10 years to have the outcome of these processes. So it takes that the accessibility to the justice takes, or it's considered an informality, because sometimes people can pass away or can die. So it is not possible that it's taken longer, that people have the mechanisms that may be more effective. So that is why all countries we are here, we have a resources for the legal environment. And just as an example, I have a personal action, a ordinary judge mentioned a user that have a certain disease. In that time, we didn't understand exactly what Social Security was as a fundamental right. And just this is for an example. The judge told us that he could go into the labor ordinary judgment, since that person has a labor capacity into the 75%, because he doesn't have any way to support himself. Since at that time we didn't have the labor resource legal environment, so he has to go, who has to ask for an ordinary labor for 10 years. So I understand that he has to die just to not to make it effective or right for his labor process. At the end, we got the positive action. So he approved the fundamental labor right for that person. Hopefully that person is still alive. He still work. And he is a very proactive person in comparison for the disease the human rights we have here in this country. We have here right now a question. Can we share with you our questions? We are reading here. Thank you very much. My name is Maritza Velasquez. I'm from Guatemala. I belong into an organization that works into the labor rights for human rights, for also for in the vulnerable sectors. I would like to comment something that it could be also a question for you, doctor. And I thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very interesting for us and also for justice. It is available for our agenda. Actually, we are going talking to the justice into the domestic labor market in Guatemala. It exists a program that doesn't represent exactly the real interest for the social security benefit for the domestic workers is right in our country. So we have been looking the access uh, since 2010 for the social security, but we haven't received any answers about it. So we are trying to make our best to enhance this program. What we are visualizing here is that we consider it an injustice since we are not looking to make it better or to capitalize the social security and also for the benefit for the programs they are belong to, but just to open or have the opportunity for the dialogue for the people who have the more representative people in these programs. And also, we are looking to generate programs that benefit other labor sectors that also work into certain services. For example, in the sexual workers, that is the organization for the union in Guatemala. This is one of the important unions in America and Central America. So they are looking to have access to social security. And I conclude here that these programs should be part of this openness into the research or the search to enhance inequalities to certain vulnerable sectors. In this case, for the working women. So this is all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your intervention. It was very interesting. So you have resumed the objective of this coffee. So I told you that we were going to talk about 3 dimensions. The huge dimension of social security that includes the traditional pension concept, but also of the new concept that we're talking right now for social security. Not only about the topics of this, but also for the wellness and quality of life for fundamental essential human right. The first dimension social security right nowadays social security have a different connotation. We have to understand the most important dimension of social security is to be a right. It's like essential human right. What does it mean? I have had the opportunity to work with Guatemala in certain times. I know that Guatemala, in respect to the women workers, have this problem into the system. Nowadays, even though we are not affiliated into a certain system, and normally these systems have the concept of this system have different concept of Latin America from the Bismarck concept. We are going to talk about this later to understand this concept. Bismarck, in a certain time in Germany, nowadays we call it a Bismarck model. He provide that the security for the social issues. That is why we can see here that Mexico has the Social Security or the Mexican Institute of Social Security those social security institutions that are most similar for the social security in Germany, those social security institutions were only the technical, instrumental, institutional concept from Bismarck that was the secure also for the certain topics for social security. In that time is carbon workers were going to make some unions. So he mentioned that just to secure certain social issues in a compulsory way. And we have certain Bismarck concepts to have it in our countries just to being contributive for the employer, and also workers in certain countries. For example, in Colombia, we are only provide employees. We have a three-party figure here. And also for the past coffee, Dr. Martins mentioned something that it was essential just to provide benefits for the employees in terms for the social security, but in terms of human right. What I mean here is not only to put it into contributive way, but uh, the system exists itself. In Colombia, we have many challenges and many strengths right now, but we are having provided here nowadays. We are looking for, we're going forward into social security as a human right. Nowadays, no one into a country mentioned that our domestic workers can be beneficial from this system. Being a human right, we have the right to having the social security, right for the social security. The countries have other dimension from this, not only for the human right that is inherent for everyone, that is considered into certain systems. I have here the example of Colombia because I'm not expert from other countries. For us in Colombia, it's very weird, even though that we have been considering to the 48 article in our constitutions for the, and also Article 2, Article 9, Article 7, for certain observations that are going to talk about this topic, because we will have enough time to talk about this. But for example, the comment 3, or also comment 14 or 18, that talks about the right to social security or the right to health. Even though we had this in Colombia or Central American countries, we didn't understand this as human right. In our constitution in 91, in the constitution of 86, even though we have many reforms into the 36 articles and we had any other reforms, we didn't have any article written into the constitutions for the health, right for the health. We had here a essential figure that calls a public assistance that was understood as the charity or beneficial from the church. And the charity is not a right. So that is why they're very important, the second word for the right, because right is a guarantee. Guarantee is not a guarantee. And right now, the states for social security, also for the constituent states, have to guarantee this. The state has to guarantee this. First of all, social security for people have to have this right, the essential right. This is the first thing that we have to make it justice for in our country. And second, to have a gender focus. and a focus of the people who are working on this. I consider that we don't have a social security. We have to focus into the rights. Even though we have a system, even though we haven't any standard, or even though it exists or as an universal right, or in the international standards that we have many, even though all of those things, we should have the right to social security. In terms of dimension of human rights, just of being human right, we have the right for social security because it's inherent or it's essential. And why is essential for their lives? In Colombia, we have started to have the ownership, just not to talk about the system, but we have to talk about the right. And the second system that we are looking in this CAFET was the dimension of a public essential service, public service. If I ask you what social security is, I know that you understand this in a different way. This is just a part of the essential part from this. So we have a great dimension here. So in this context, social security will be understood in different way. So, for example, in emergencies, or in the pension payments, or the payment for the retirement, in those services that have the connotation for make it effective the right for the public services, but and also it is essential because it has continuity, because it's immediate principle or quality principle, and it consider all the essential elements for as a right that we have for here. And we have four elements just to consider as a certain country, as Colombia, Guatemala, or Mexico, any country, if they guarantee or not justiciability or the rights. If we consider a certain institutional or international body, we have to make an analysis of it. We don't have we have to analyze this just in general, but we have to make it to provide proofs to understand the essential human rights in social security, and the verb is to guarantee. And the country has to guarantee this into three comprehensive verbs that comes to the international law. That is, for example, respect. Guatemala, Mexico, or any country has to respect social security as human right and as an essential right. Here there is a test in which we can measure this in a certain country, but also we have to respect. The second verb is protect social security in every visions, in every dimensions as collective. The contributive social security that was talked as Bismarck also does protect non-contributive social security. That was the ideal of the William Lewis when Dr. Martin mentioned before. And the Beveridge law in 1942 mentioned that the rights has not only for the employees, but also has to contribute. It doesn't mean that it has to contribute differently, but this is just for people that don't have the possibility to contribute, but they have to be guaranteed. Nowadays, we are talking about the minimum, essential minimum points. And also we have here the question. universal pensions for all people who was born with any disability that are not going to work due to the disability, or during the childhood, or the elderly, they don't have the right for any benefit or economical benefit, or any domestic worker, or any people that has not the right to have the protection or to the benefits for this. William Burris in England mentioned that it has to be for universal, has to be contributed for everyone. Just to highlight, I has read that the father of the Social Security was Bismarck. I say that he hasn't been the father for Social Security, but the father for the right, as we understand right now, could be William Beveridge, among others. Then some other people who talk about Social Security as Simon Bolivar, for example, he's engaged discuss. Even though we don't have systems, we have put it into essential human. This is example as any Venezuelan people. I have here an example of the Venezuela for a child who need the urgent care in our system, which is based into the 1973 law, which has many strengths, but we have many complex things that is not based into the contributive payable issues. So they say that they don't, the child doesn't need the benefit because they don't have any social security. So this system they mentioned that say that no, because they are not registered. Or this rule that they say no, they have to ask, or they have to be able for their rights, for their health rights. So they have to apply this, not only because the people is foreign, but also they have to provide this service for any vulnerable people. Our court mentioned before that he has this essential right. He has a preferable essential right for this system. The public health system has to provide assistance to this child. The difference here is how much we have to ask for, but we have to pay for it. So the public have the right to be attend to receive the benefit for this. And also the judgment for this law, I don't apply this rule into the 1793 rule. And in this case, I apply the right dimension. I apply specifically the question I mentioned here. It is a principle from here. 3, and dignity, human dignity, and also that is an absolute right. And do we have already answers? Yes, we already have some answers. Let me see. The answer that has the most answers was the democratization. Financing sustainability, 10%, human dignity, 25%, and that is absolute right, 39%. That was the answer that we received. Thank you very much, Maritza, for asking this. As human right and essential service and as a system. In many countries, including Colombia, was greater the conception from Bismarck. And we are still centralized a human concept into our constitution in 91. But we are also talking about as a human right as a second category. Just to, as an example, just for you to understand the importance of this. Okay, we'll talk about the same example. This person is qualified, has been qualified. It means that just to the capacity of labor capacity. Or in Colombia, it means the general capacity. He has a 75% of salary. And with this, he has to ask for the disability pension. In our country, as a rule, a person has disability pension, contributed pension ability, and he has been contributed for that time. He has been quartered 15 weeks. He has been declared with disability due to that qualification. When he asked for his pension, disability pension, someone from the system realized that he lasted 6 more weeks because it is a rule. So our system that created into the Social Security, the comprehensive Social Security system, mentioned that he doesn't have this right. And in this sense, it has to do with a certain labor issue. But at that time, and the time is we are talking about their human right just as a general possibility or political or legal judicial topic. In that time, the right for social security was not fundamental, even though we had all the elements to ask for it. In the standard level, we had the right, but as wellness or human right, we didn't have it. So Article 86 for the Constitution and also for the Article 103 in your Mexican Constitution or certain other articles that call about the ownership for this resource. Yes, in Mexico City, we're talking about Articles 103 or 107, if I'm not mistaken. In our Colombian Political Constitution on Article 86, mention that only are positive for the fundamental or essential rights. So our Social Security Constitution misunderstood the Social Security right. And also our Article 2 mentioned that what are the rights for the Social Security for people. And what was mistaken that this was not fundamental, we were not able to provide this right. When we put it into an ownership, the judge mentioned that was not connection with this. Because Colombia creates something very interesting here, because the right was not fundamental, but was just for a connection. We have to convert it into ownership because it can affect to someone who was the possess the ownership. So what we have here, the contradiction here. So it is not fundamental, but in this case, it has a connection with this. We can put it into practice. This person has to wait longer. And there was other person that was called Marita that has faced cancer. So they mentioned that was not functionally right when we have to have the ownership. There was not connectivity to this. So we have to put into the second instance to prepare the resource for the action for the ownership. And also the judge mentioned that it is not a connection. And Margarita started to get worse into the cancer. And we start doing the review that our constitution make this action. It is just to review the failures into the ownership, and maybe it can change or not. And the judge mentioned that it has connectivity. But the judge mentioned that we have connection. Margarita was already died. So we are. So when Margarita was died, they make the sentence approved, but they didn't consider that nowadays in Colombia, the same judge or the statutory held law doesn't consider this. And now, right, human social security right is essential. Some people in Colombia may mention that this is not a human right. So this is indeed essential for us. Our system mentioned that Pablo was not able to this human right available, but this is a rule for the system. But also militaries, lecturers, or other people have certain regimes. They don't have to apply this. They don't apply this, but everyone has a right. But we have different ways to access to this right. So the rule into this justiciability mentioned the world, either international organizations, mentioned that we have to mark the dimension for the right. And what are the principles for the right? In there, the universality, interdependency also. And someone told me that we have to clean or to delete all the principles for the human right. I will leave it the principle pro hominem. Pro hominem. This is an international principle that mentions that when we have a different interpretation or better interpretation from other for a certain case or for the person, we have to prefer this, to put the benefit, because it's a principle into the benefit world. It has the beneficial for the person or the community in favor for humanity. This is a principle pro hominem. And going back to the same question. So there are countries as us that have certain systems, and there are others that don't have any systems. Or they just put into practice social security right, because this is a law. But countries, as countries, we have, the majority of us have this system. We have to provide the right to human social security. The right for rules sometimes provide a negative context for the person, but we have to put into practice certain special mechanisms into the rule, that we have the principle in the rule. So in a different concept of social security, the principles are linkage. Not only that I have learned before that are only rectors, but nowadays the rights have other conceptions of social security because they are linkaged. For the lawyers, we are taught we are taught a pyramid that is called the pyramid of cancel. Cancel. This cancel pyramid show the hierarchy that we have other principles within others. In the pyramid, we have the rules. In that pyramid, we don't have any rules. We have the principles right now. So justiciability in these three dimensions. I'm going to just to conclude something with the following. Is certain countries with challenges also for strains that you are thinking about the pension system or the health or the risk pension systems. Normally, the judges thought us that we have to see or to look for a certain article or just to consult the law. First of all, we have to review the article. Sometimes the article, most of the times the article resolve this issue. But when we are going to reflect here, we don't have to do it that way. In that hypothetical or metaphorical pyramid, where the start or the bottom of the pyramid is not the principles. So we should have the constitutionality at the top as other countries. I'm not saying that all countries as constitution we have the same way to treat the human rights treaties. There are some other countries that they say that for me, it prevail. Other countries say that they have two equity in which we mention into blocks. We divide it into blocks because they don't have the constitutional right, but it's supra legal. There are some other countries that mention that they are equal or similar. If all the member states, most of us are part of this, we are being part for the convention. The convention mentioned that or the pacts or for the international human rights, I learned very hard something that was the Pacta Uta Parta. And the pacts are for just to comply them. And also for certain ILO conventions are based into essential principles that are also called essential principles. Nowadays, we are 10 essential conventions. The conventions of ILO mention that even though you have not ratified this, you have this ratification to comply with them. There is a constitution that has not been to be constitution, but I read it, and this constitution was a project of the constitution in Article 15 in Chile in 2022. If I'm going to create a certain constitution in any country, I'm not talking about the certain articles, but also to talk about the treaties for human rights. I will add it here in all constitutions because it resolved the issue that restrict the law. There are certain law that is not current law, but it talks about all the treaties about human rights because all human rights are part of this constitution. And this new concept of social security, the concepts are linked. In some other example from Colombia, or again, for everyone who has been judges, for example, Article 36 of the certain law. So they say if you have the right or not. First of all, we don't have to adequate the article to a certain international law, but we have to look for the information for the international law, what says about that article. And also after the article, we can see a code. We have to start from the code for the formal law, and then we have to we are looking we realize that we are some articles that can serve as examples to put into practice the right. We have in a 61 law. There's also called Patowski. And in Colombia, is dominated into the resources law. It means that a certain person has a vulnerability or relevant disability that when they are working in their environment, they don't have to be recession. But this has to be resolved into a labor process. The judge mentioned that we have to make it awkward. So we have to review the Convention for the Human Rights and for people with disabilities. It means that in certain times we have to comply with what the law says. And also the disability convention is based into the health model and not for the disability social model. So we have to change the application into the law for a formal way. So if you have answered, that is why I'm agree with Dr. Martin. And now we are going to talk about certain charts, just one. Sometimes countries mention that we have to work. We have to work for the rights for human rights. In certain countries mention that we don't have any money, but we have social security for the solidarity or for human solidarity. And we don't have to talk about money, but it's also for the quality of life for humans. And sometimes if certain institutions doesn't have any offices for to attend the people, but we need to provide quality of life for human, to bring to practice the human right. And this law has the person has to feel heard or to treat it very well, because sometimes they don't have any money, and sometimes this person with disability doesn't have the right, or because they don't have any conditions for health or education or housing, because social security or contributive social security don't provide the mechanisms. Now, in our conception, it is essential to be protected, as we mentioned in Social Security, in a new word, the determination for Social Security. What was the other question? Oh, financing sustainability. The basic principles of Social Security as a right, human dignity, and universally that we have all the right for the rights and also for the capacity for enhancement for the capacities. Social security, yeah, we have to worry about social security, but have to improve these systems to sustainable systems, not only to play the right or to have the right to this. In a certain countries, we have the options that there are people who have the strengths, but they have the right to social security. Yes, financing dignity is important. That is part of the system. That is absolute right. That many people answer. Just to reflect, human rights are not absolute. For example, what will happen during the pandemic? most of the countries have to ask for other countries in a sectional way. In certain countries, suspended human fundamental rights. I'm sorry, they limited it. They limited these rights. What rights? The rights of a free locomotion. For example, a health economic benefit. They are integrated or very comprehensive because they have to treat certain biological issue. But also they are integrated or interdependent because with your rights in certain ways in your labor market are essential. But most of the countries that this is okay, in their systems, as we have certain benefit plans, we exclude that the public benefits or systems provide, we have to be paid by they are not covered certain aesthetic coverages. Or if someone want to go into certain surgery, it's different, the benefit in comparison with person that has certain disability or issues for as health. In that terms, we can mention that there is not absolute. The dimension of the right is a dignity, a human dignity. Just to conclude that human dignity is in today's public services is essential. For example, in urgencies, the attention of urgency. Some other essential public services that have the countries have 4 elements. One element is the accessibility. Most of our laws internationally and nationally have not only for certain demands, are for all the demands that are for accessibility, either for information, economic information, or physical information. The second principle is availability. Most of the countries we have availability. The availability for doctors in rural areas, institutions with technology or accessible technology institutions. And also another principle that I love here is the acceptability. The accessibility is that we have here in your constitution, Mexico, Guatemala, and most of the countries in Article 7, that is called multiculturality. The respect for the indigenous populations or population, foreign populations, for the gender, for the age. This is called acceptability. One of the characteristics of the justiciability, we have to take into account the justiciability. Since it is not the same cosmopolitan of our rural people, so we have to call it clarity. This is just efficiency, opportunity for the treatment. As I mentioned, Dr. Martin, I will add the fifth element. Does anyone has a fifth element with Will Smith? It was a movie. What was the fifth element? Love. Warmth. So we have, it doesn't matter if we have the availability, accessibility, if the people or those who provide the assistance or the people who ask for these attendings doesn't have the right to be treated as humans, because social security is a topic of humanity. And that is why I mentioned that this human right is a guarantee. And also that talks about freedoms as human because it's essentially for the human rights. And it's consecrated as everything that we are going to see into the curse is human because there has been humanity. We have to treat people with great quality or warmest quality. It has to be applied, it has to be complied or fulfilled. Even though we work into the domestic environment, we have to have access to social security. In a very Central American country, they have been searching what there is social security in the domestic environment. We don't have to take the union in law, but the disability in additional laws. We have just to put it into practice. But also, we have to consider 5 reasons. If it's a fundamental essential right, in every country have to take into consideration 5 guarantees. The first one, essential rights in difference for all their social security system has to apply immediate appliance. And they have to have quick access. Second, have to research or a union action for ownership as human rights. The third one has to not to be limited. If you review the norm, they don't have or they don't talk about the social security for the rights that have not been limited, but they are essential. So it doesn't have to be limited. And fourth, they have to have an essential content. We're going to talk about this in the course. What Social Security is, what is the essential content of Social Security? And the fifth one, and the most important, they have to answer into more important principles than the ones we already have. By 50,000 pesos, we don't have to leave the people die. Because a certain session that you have before, I don't remember exactly the name of the session, mentioned that the objective of the pension is to provide pensions, to everyone. And that is why this is a human right, an essential human right. And now, so the course is going to be the title Justice and Social Security Challenges. Okay, we have here also international legislation in the Americas. And some other partner that we're going to talk about freedoms. And also other topics that are going to be taught by Dr. Asiela. What I mean here is that this course is a protector, this created by the Inter-American law. We have effective rights, effective laws. And finally, with Dr. Gabriela, main actions and mechanisms and procedures. If I can provide the whole course. We're going to study the emergence of Social Security through historical analysis. We cannot have any standard in any country, but we need a right for human Social Security. We are invited to be part of this course. As you already may see, you are invited from the CIESS platform. Monarchy, I'm the king, and I don't take someone in granted. We need constitutions. We need some other laws in which the rights are considered. And we can talk about individual rights, but some other parts, we need social rights in terms to be more widened. And we should have constitutions from the one in 1917 in Russia or the one in Germany, 1919. So we have to normalize into these constitutions into topics for labor human rights. And also for the schedules for work and the social functionalism. But we have a new theory that is called constitutionalism. So we have to put into practice some other constitutions, not only in the Latin American countries say that we don't need more formal rights systems. So just to, as an example, just see this picture, equality and equity. As the France law mentioned that we are very different from the law. And the state, how the state guarantee this? And they entitle this affirmative actions. When we are talking about equity or gaps or equality or material equality, we are talking about equity. Who can make it and still have to still working. The first one is because they are tall and they have a small share. So this is called inequity. They have to have similar rights. As for many topics or many environments, as for the to enhance a great wellness for human. And when we're writing today now, it's happiness. Thank you very much. We have Carlos Javier Izaguirre who right here his hand. Please go ahead with your intervention. Can you hear me? Hello, thank you very much. I'm from Honduras. I'm Carlos Javier Izaguirre. First of all, congratulations to our colleague. I mean, I have a master's degree in different areas, and I have a BA in international relationship. Congratulations to our colleague. Just thinking about the fundamental for the positive right for every country. And this is vital and essential and urgent for the countries. So it is essential to mention here that it exists also in just a complementary way, a important studies from the international cooperation researchers and also for the World Bank. Just as mentioned, some of them. And this white book states specifically the universal right for social security. And also into the framework to the elderly or progress elderly process. In this sense, we have all the technical foundations that has to be comprehensive. and not just to talk about for the all the topics. So there are certain things that justify this to provide, like we have to comply with the this right as a fundamental human right. And this is what I was about to mention to congratulate our colleague for your excellent participation that since he considered all the elements. If you want, I can share with you the document since we have all the technical documentation. And I will be very glad to keep in touch with you. And sharing the document to between colleagues is also always helpful, and also to enhance wellness for the population, which is the reason for our lives. Again, congratulations to our colleague. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate. Thank you very much, Javier, for your words. This is very important what you mentioned here. The documentation is very important because some of the part of the international social security institutions are part of the human rights for the societies. If you have any documentation, you can provide this for us. And you have mentioned something else here that it's similar for this comment. I mentioned that there are some protective organizations very important into the social security world, but we also have the CIESS, the Inter-American Conference, but also we have the Social Security International Organization, and also for the Ibero-American Social Security Institution. The majority of us, we are part of this. We are these bodies that we're keeping working on this, contributing to these concepts are thought. We have here a phrase from 1942. It is possible to concept all the human conceptualizations. We already have here the Constitution for the workers. Tomorrow will be better than yesterday. So we have to find a human environment that can contribute to among us in a more generous and humanitarian way. So that will be an open window for happiness. Thank you very much, Carlos. Comments here into the chat. Is there any country that has contributed to the convention? Since this convention doesn't come to part of this convention, only Cuba. In case of Guatemala, we don't have the convention. It doesn't exist the formality or the obligation to respect and comply with the social security right for this worker sector. Carlos Zuniga mentioned in Ecuador, it established the obligation for the social security and insurance also for the domestic workers. It is established into an organic penal code. There exists a labor minister that supervises compliance. Delicia in Honduras mentioned that subsidies are temporary and they only have been provided once. The persons that are a family and non-economic protection. And also we have the question what we are going to do, what we're doing just to change this and to gain accessibility to social security. And finally, Maria Emilia Vargas mentioned that we have to have currents into the financing stability and the guarantee for the social security for all the citizenship and the way of they apply for this right. These are all of the questions we have here. And thank congratulations for an excellent session. When we are talking about social security or guarantees or wellness or effective rights for human rights, as I mentioned before, we have many challenges in many countries. And also because as someone mentioned before, as a Beveridge talked about solidarity and rights, but he also talked about universality in the rights. And also someone else mentioned that we have difficult paths to keep moving forward. That we were very glad if all countries understand that social security is a right, fundamental right. Not only that we have to work as a country for ratification as a standard or to ratify a convention, even though we are knowing that we are taking into account the legal context. There is a 190 convention that is very recent for the labor harassment or certain labor environments. The majority of the countries, less countries of our region have ratified this. This is not a part of the fundamental principles because this is why they have not been ratified. But for me, conventions at the 152 or the 189 or 190, due to the sense, it should have essential principles for the countries, but not only for to be standards or to be mandatory, but because the countries have to understand that social security is security. It has to be compliance. And someone mentioned rights here, but also we have duties. The duties for the people of the society towards the social security. And also we have liberties or freedoms. Just again, if this we should work on, we should not be part of this conference, but we are here to remember you as not only for the conference for the human growth, that they remember that it is important to put into practice social security, but also happiness is important. And not only principles, but also the standards. Thank you very much, everyone who participated into this CST. We invited you to leave your data to register into this course. If you can realize, you will acquire a huge knowledge, so you can complete your knowledge and also for complementary information for the security knowledge. Thank you very much to Dr. Leon for this session. And also everyone for your participation. Please don't miss the next episode for this course for social security. Thank you very much.